Today is April the 24th, 2012, and the meeting of the fiscal year 2012-2013 Urban Renewal Budget Committee is now called to order. If we could have roll call, please.
Doug Mealy.
Here.
Betty Mom. Here. Carol Pauley.
Here.
Kathy Roth.
Here.
Rocky Smith.
Here.
Laura Zentner. Autumn Rudisill. Chris Geiger.
Here.
William Gifford.
Here.
Chris Story.
Here.
Paul Edgar.
Here.
Graham Peterson.
Here.
Philip Yates. Robert Seward. Brian Shaw.
Here.
Casey Flesh.
Here.
Aaron Olson.
Here.
Sean Datchler.
Here. All right, thank you. Tonight's meeting is available after the meeting on the city's website. I want to thank all of the city staff who dedicated their time and effort in the preparation for this evening's Urban Renewal Budget Committee meeting. We're now at item 2 on your agenda, and there's a matter that our city manager, Mr. Frazier, would like to address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier today, our city recorder received a complaint that one of our budget committee members did not live in the city limits. And we then posed this question to the city attorney, and we got an opinion back from him late today. The opinion is essentially there are 2 classifications of budget committee members. Some of you are aware of this. There are those members of the elected body or the governing body. In this case, it's the Urban Renewal Commission members are considered the governing body under the statute. Members of the governing body are automatically members of the budget committee. So their qualifications to be on the budget committee is by virtue of their appointment to the Urban Renewal Commission. There's a second classification of budget committee membership, which are citizen members, citizens at large. And those members have to be electorates of the city. In other words, they have to be residents of the city. And so the notification we got this morning that was Mr. Kitchen, Warren Kitchen, who is sitting over here, and I want to thank him very much for serving last year, even though he wasn't technically on the committee because he wasn't a resident. And since he hasn't moved into the city today, he's still not a resident, and effectively Warren is not on the committee. So you do have a vacancy as a result of that. And I also have a written explanation from the city attorney for anybody that wants to see it. We sent that up to the city commission already. But so again, I think everyone had the best intentions. I'm assuming I know Mr. Kitchen did. I just had to visit with him. The appointing authority probably also had the best intention. We're going to go back and I'm going to ask the city recorder to look at our applications for these various positions that we have and make sure that residency is somewhere disclosed on there, and so we can remind people, if we don't already, that if you're going to be a citizen member of the budget committee, you need to be a resident. So sorry for any misunderstanding. Yes?
Just in the spirit of not misunderstanding, I want to make sure that I was the one. I chatted with Warren a few months ago, and he mentioned that he didn't live in the city, and at that time I was suggesting that he apply for city commissioner when he mentioned that he didn't live in this. And it wasn't until today that I got to talk about it. I just called to find information. It was not a complaint. I didn't call the complaint. I just called for information.
Yeah. Well, either way, however you want to characterize it, we know one of our presumed members is not a resident. They're not a committee member. So you have a vacancy, and if you want to fill it at some point, there's a process for that, and the mayor would make that determination. And I think in this case, Warren just told me that his residence is across the street from the city limits. So, I mean, it's a pretty close call there, and I can understand why something like that would happen. And the people involved, I don't think any of them had a clue that this would be an issue. So, are there any questions about that?
For clarification, the responsibility to actually enter the position would lie with the chair of the Urban Renewal Commission, would it not the mayor?
I believe the mayor was the appointing authority.
I think so. I think so. You just haven't had that experience yet. It's coming your way.
We did.
Yeah, we did.
We're very good about it. It happens sometimes, despite the best intentions. That's the only announcement I have, Mr. Chairman, at this moment.
All right. Thank you, David. Appreciate it. As I mentioned, we are on agenda item 2 for reviewing the budget committee process, authority, and decisions. We will comply with ORS 294.414, which was renumbered from ORS 294.336 in 2011 that addresses the budget committee for municipalities. We also will comply with Oregon Administrative Rule 504.420, the Oregon Department of Revenue Local Budgeting Manual that was revised in June of 2010. Specific attention is referenced to Chapter 8, the Budget Committee, and approving the budget. Both of these documents are available online at Oregon.gov. We're now on agenda item 3. That's our first order of business for the election of a chairperson. ORS 294.414 subsection 9 reads, the Budget Committee shall, at its first meeting after its appointment, elect a presiding officer from among its members. Are there any motions for nominations?
Aaron Olson, Chair.
Second.
Are there any other nominations?
We liked your campaign.
Last call for any other nominations. All right. Well, thank you. And I heard 2 motions. At this time, I think we'll go ahead and do a vote.
Betty Mum.
Aye.
Chris Story.
Aye.
William Gifford.
Aye.
Sean Batchelor.
Aye.
Paul Edgar.
Aye.
Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Laura Zentner. Kathy Roth.
Aye.
Chris Geiger.
Aye.
Doug Neely.
Aye.
Casey Flesch.
Aye.
Autumn Rudisil.
Aye.
Carol Pauley.
Aye.
Graham Peterson.
Aye.
Brian Shaw.
Aye.
Aaron Olson.
Abstain.
You can vote for yourself.
Okay, I'll humility is always welcome.
Thank you for once again doing that.
Thank
Great
you.
job.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We're on agenda item 4 is our next order of business. That's the approval of minutes of the April 26, 2011 Urban Renewal Budget Committee. The document is labeled agenda item 4A. May I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right. Is there a need for a discussion? All right. By the raising of your hand, please raise your hand if you approve the minutes of the April 26, 2011 Urban Renewal Budget Committee. All right. Keep those hands up, please. And Nancy, if you could help me out there. How many do we have?
Okay.
Do we have unanimous now?
And if there's any nays?
Yes. And are there any nays? Any opposition? No, there's none. The motion passes.
I want to ask a question.
Yes,
It's a
please.
point of confusion. This is looking at the allocation last year. On the historical grant program, we adopted 140,000. And I just noticed in the notice, in the minutes, we Autumn put it forward, motion to allocate 100,000 last year. I presume that decision was changed at some point or another to raise it to 140.
What page is that?
Well, that's on the first page, a little over halfway down. Motion by Autumn Rudisil, second by William Gifford, to allocate $100,000 for the store.
And the correct amount should be what?
Well, it was, I presume, the adopted budget says 140,000. I don't know if the change was made at the Urban Renewal Commission meeting.
There was a vote of 15 to 0 to leave it at 140.
Oh,
On my last year's budget, should be in the budget.
Well, also on number 8, it says storefront improvement grants program will continue in the next budget cycle. However, due to a community response staff is proposing a budget of $120,000. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was equally confused because I read in the minutes that Autumn had made a motion to pass for $100,000. If I remember right, we talked about that for about half an hour, too.
So I don't know if the minutes are, I voted for it, so maybe
I was going to say, maybe we moved too quickly on the
maybe
minutes.
we did move too quickly.
Well, in the spirit of doing the right things, we can make an adjustment.
You can make a motion to approve with the corrections that are announced into the record.
Do I have a motion?
We don't know if we do it right.
I guess my question is, I prefer, I don't know how to best do it, but these minutes are taped, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, we can go back and confirm what was in there.
Yeah.
I don't really want to change something when I'm just not certain
Sure.
what happened in the process.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, let's,
So my intention is not to change the minutes.
Sure.
The minutes may be accurate,
yes,
but I was just wondering what happened essentially.
right, yeah. We can easily go back
So
and,
actually, we have three numbers, 100,000, 120,000, and 140,000. And I agree with the mayor, I don't really care which one, I just think it should be reflected accurately.
I concur.
Wasn't the number that we've been going with, though, 140?
Yes, it is.
I guess my notes from last year said the vote was approved 15-0. Right, we're looking at it now.
Yeah, so I think we should go with that adopted number.
Yeah. However, it is a record, and, you know, there's notation.
For the record, Autumn doesn't remember.
But of course, William seconded it, so he did it right.
I'm sure you do.
And I'll stipulate.
I agree with all.
I cover a page and a half of continual changes. I would like to, do we have a discussion about minutes? Maybe we
Yes.
could get them sent out like earlier than a year later. Just so it's like a little fresher in our minds.
Yes.
I don't know if that's possible. But we don't have to approve or anything, but at least have.
Evil eye. No, we can do that. Yeah, no, that's possible.
Very good.
I know I got problems remembering this morning myself, so a year later it's kind of tough.
So you want by midnight tonight?
Sure.
Now you're giving the eye.
There you go.
Very good. All right.
So,
Please.
just a point of clarification, so then you're approving the minutes as presented because the number was according to what the budget adopted it as. Is that correct?
I think.
Do we need to change, I mean, whoever made the motion needs to change.
No, Doug didn't want to change the minutes because he didn't know.
Yeah, whatever, I mean, what we have to establish is whatever we agreed to last year. We don't, this is not clear whether the minutes are right.
Since there seems to be some confusion about the
I think
numbers,
it's just checking.
I'm okay if someone wants to make the motion.
Move that we correct the minutes to reflect that the $140,000 figure for the storefront grants. That's what was adopted.
Well, these minutes could be correct. So I think we just need to have somebody go back and look at the tape and send us an email and say what happened. And what's the correct answer?
Right. Yes.
And if it turns out that it was 140, then
Well, we adopted 140, so
Please.
Yeah.
If I might, you could make a conditional approval with the direction to staff that the minutes be corrected to reflect what actually occurred.
Right.
And my recollection is what David has here is correct, that it was 140, because I know that's not what we proposed, and the committee added money to it. But I don't want to go on my recollection, I'd rather go off the tape.
Yes.
Go off the tape.
I think that's a good conditional motion. And I think just to follow protocol here, we should have a motion. I would like to hear a motion.
So then would this,
Who first, yeah, who
Yeah.
made the original motion?
I made the original.
Okay, so just add that you want to make sure it accounts for the correction, whatever it is.
Okay, so I will add that to my motion.
And I will second it.
Good
Again.
job.
All right. Discussion? All right, let's go ahead and vote on that. And by a show of hands, those in favor, raise your hand, please. Those opposed, raise your hand. I see one. The motion, conditional motion.
You
passes.
started.
Yeah, but I don't know the minutes are this.
I think we're okay. Thank you.
Or we just want whatever the correction is.
We're now ready to move forward to agenda item 5, calls for receiving the budget message from the budget officer. The report is marked agenda item 5A and will be given by David Laser, according to the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to make sure committee members have all got this new sheet. This one with the colors on it as opposed to the green one that's in your packet. Everybody have the current one? Anyone who doesn't have the current one? Okay. So this is the revised document. And so that is essentially your budget message that you were in receipt of. We're going to go through a presentation. Before we do, I want to talk a little bit about some of the progress that the Urban Renewal Commission has made in recent months, because some of the budget committee members, particularly the citizen members, may not be aware of that progress. So I want to make sure that you understood that. Unlike last year, we have a couple of new members. We had a little bit of a train wreck for a meeting last year. I think that would be putting it mildly. And so this year what we've done is we've worked in a priority setting, several priority setting sessions with the Urban Renewal Commission so that the things that you see in your budget have all been vetted thoroughly with the Commission before tonight. So that was one of the lessons learned last year of our budget process. And that has occurred. And also another thing that has occurred is that the Urban Renewal Commission has adopted a set of core values that they want to guide the Commission's decision making, but also the work that the staff is doing on behalf of the Commission. And just in particular for the citizen members, those core values are return on investment, seeking to cultivate resources, process, and investment in underutilized or affected areas within the district. Third, making the Urban Renewal Commission or the Urban Renewal District a destination point. Fourth is job creation. Fifth is economic development. And sixth is historic and cultural interpretation of resources within the district. So those are the 6 guiding principles that the Commission has adopted. Also, at our last City Commission meeting, there was a discussion about the composition of the Urban Renewal Commission. Principally, the numbers, how many commissioners are on it, and what the qualifications should be. And we have fewer members now just through attrition, and our direction from our city commissioners, who are the authorities that set the boundaries, the parameters for the Urban Renewal Commission, their direction to us was that they want to go to a 7-member commission from a 9-member commission. That's a little bit more consistent with what occurs in the rest of the state as far as the size of the commission. And how to achieve that, how to get to 7 members, they haven't really sorted that out yet, but the staff is coming up with 3 or 4 different resolutions by which they can achieve that end. And that will ultimately be up to the city commission how they want to get there, but that's the direction we've gotten. We also got direction from them that they want the commission members to be selected at large from the community rather than in particular places. So those are things we're working on. We haven't got a final direction from the commission yet because we're working on that. And when that comes, that will be in the form of a resolution at a public city commission meeting. Tonight's budget is a little over $11 million. It's largely a restricted funds budget, meaning that, as many of you know, these funds are already obligated to certain activities and projects within the district that have been codified in the Urban Renewal Plan. So it's not like there's, hundreds of thousands of dollars here in discretionary spending that you have to make decisions on. So as a restricted fund, we haven't added any new programs, but we have adjusted some of the priorities based again on direction from the Urban Renewal Commission. There isn't a lot of change. The Total revenues and expenditures have decreased by 5.2%. And the revenues are down primarily because the rental income is no longer received in rents from the GrowCo site. And the commission dealt with this at an earlier meeting, so those members will not be surprised by that. But again, citizen members were not at that meeting, so they may not be aware of that. Also, our expenditures are down because when our revenues go down, we naturally adjust our expenditures. We're also going to have fewer, I think, a little bit of a reduction in marketing costs, and legal and consulting fees are down this year considerably from last year when the commission was grappling with the Rivers project. That project that didn't occur did take a lot of consultant time and legal expenses. So with that, I'm going to let Eric Underwood, and Eric is our new economic development manager. He's been here with us about 4 months, and actually longer than that, I think.
A little over 5 months.
Yeah, a little over 5 months. And so for those of you who don't know Eric, he's the gentleman here to the right of David Wimmer. And this is David Wimmer's 19th Urban Renewal Commission budget. David will be retiring, well earned, I might add, this year. And
Am I going to do a 20?
Come on,
Make it a nice
David.
swan song.
Yeah, buy a gold-plated watch.
And I don't know, all of us, many of you are retired in this room. And, there's different ways to go out, I suppose. People get senioritis and they kind of stop working in the last 6 months, some of them. Some people work hard at it to the last day. Other people just get kind of crazy and can't focus. But David has he's been one of those guys that just stays focused the whole time. He hasn't let up a single day. He's still doing the job with 3 people. No wonder he's retiring. But I just really want to thank you, David, for your work on behalf of the Renewal Commission. Thank you. So, Eric, your show.
Thank you. Okay, well, we have developed a little PowerPoint here to just kind of give a...
And while we're adjusting the lights here, just to let you know, for the agenda, we're on number 6, and then we'll transition to number 7 as well.
So I kind of created a little a PowerPoint to kind of give a snapshot and overview of the budget, summary of the budget, and what we've accomplished over the year. So as a quick overview, the Urban Renewal District has a maximum indebtedness of approximately $130 million. About 845 acres rounded up altogether. It consists of the waterfront, cove business areas, and the downtown. It's primarily designed for mixed use, consisting primarily commercial, office, and residential. So I've listed out the goals that are documented in the Urban Renewal Plan to improve the traffic capacity and safety, pedestrian facilities, park and recreation facilities, and other public facilities. Improvements of the renewal area as a commercial and employment center, stimulate private development, to fulfill Metro Region 2040 growth concepts that are consistent with the city's comp plan. And these are the 6 core values or guiding principles that David's mentioned in his budget message. I'll need to list those out again, but these were established by the Urban Renewal Commission this year and will be used as guidelines for future development in the district. With the establishment of the core values, we were also able the Commission was also able to prioritize projects. Now, these are projects that have been brought up by the Commission and have already been listed in the plan, and we were able to prioritize them. So what I have listed here are the highest priority projects that the Commission decided on. The first one is the train depot out on Washington Street, and trying to identify a use for that in order to collect some revenues from rent or lease. And we're still talking about that. We're going to be having a tour here at our next Urban Renewal Commission meeting to go over some of those ideas. And then once something is identified, we'll actively market that piece of property to get a tenant in there. The other highest priority is the economic development opportunities at the north end, and that's the north end downtown area. Identifying the potential sites for development, for redevelopment, mapping those out and prioritizing those, and also actively and aggressively marketing those for development. The third highest priority would be to explore the options for disposing of development infill properties. Now, that is a proactive approach to when a deal does come to the table. It's an opportunity for the commission to think about how they want to dispose of the property. Do they want to collect revenue? Are they more focused on development? How are some of the deals done? How can they be done? How are certain ways we can incentivize these developments in the infill properties? And then the last, but certainly not least, is the transfer of the Stimson property. That's primarily a trade. The Stimson property is behind the Clackamas Landscape Supply property there. It is wetlands. And the idea is to swap that piece of property that the Urban Renewal Commission owns to the city for the 12th and Main property, which the city owns. So that will be coming out within the next month or so for that discussion. Some of the accomplishments this past year within the storefront grant, we've generated a lot of interest in that. We've had some people, there was another grant that came along through the state called Diamonds in the Rough, and that helped to intensify the interest in our program. We had quite a few applications. I think one was approved for the state grant program, and then continue on with our grant program. We're going to be applying soon. And we received another letter of intent for the storefront grant program, and another one is coming on the heels of that. We established criteria for the adaptive reuse and rehab building grant program. And so that was approved by the commission this past year. And right now I'm talking with the business community. We have 3 viable interests in that program that are hoping to apply for the fiscal year. We've worked with Metro to leverage some of their funding. They've committed $120,000 to augment our current incentive programs that we have in the Urban Renewal District. We're still working on the details of that agreement, but they have been very attractive or very pleased about what we're doing in our downtown, and they want to help us out. It's a worthwhile effort. We've been aggressively marketing the Urban Renewal infill properties. You might have seen the signs around town, especially 10th and Main and 12th and Main. We're calling it the land of opportunity. We've been working with several media to get the word out on those properties and to get those developed. The historic train depot, as I mentioned earlier, we're still working on identifying use, and we'll be actively marketing that site soon. And then recruitment of business. We've been working on recruitment since I've been in my role here. They're still alive. They're still looking at coming into downtown. We've got another one that I heard about just the other day that wants to fill one of the vacant storefronts downtown as well. And so we're continuing to work on that very aggressively. So the revenue projections, this is just kind of a trend analysis here. Our revenue has dropped a little bit, 5.2% as David mentioned. We're estimating just a little over $11 million for 12-13.
Because of the man.
Yes. So this is the source of the revenue. The bulk of the revenue comes from the bond proceeds and the beginning fund balance.
Eric,
Yes.
is it justified for us to show bond proceeds coming in when in fact we don't have any real understanding if we'll need those bond proceeds because we still don't have any understanding, and our agreements with the co-people have passed. And so that 6.5 M that we were to bring in honestly probably should not be reflected at this time, because we could whenever something happens, we can always reach for it, and we also have revenues currently available for most otherwise need our current needs.
Well, I mean, the budget is, we still have this thing out there that's potentially happening. We have $7 million of expenditure which is potentially happening. It could happen in July, it could happen in next March, it may not happen at all. And so we've got the revenue and expenditure there, and if they don't happen, we don't have any actual expenditure. Also, the bank looks at our budget really closely. Since they're sitting there sort of debating whether they're going to keep our line of credit open or not, and they get a budget that has it not in there, and they say, well, why do we need a line of credit if you're not even budgeting for it?
What's the expiration date of the code agreement?
It passed.
And we're still working with the group. We're still trying to come up with a DDA on that project. So it's not dead yet.
But they have scaled down significantly what their thoughts have been. So it's very fluid over what we were previously working in and what we're now thinking, or we're hearing, is quite a bit different. So it's like the $130 million maximum line of indebtedness. It gets these big numbers out there, but are we really thinking about incurring that level of debt? Or should some of these numbers be really shrunk down to the realities of what we're really facing with in today's marketplace?
Well, as Paul knows, because he's on the governing body of the Urban Renewal Commission, the Urban Renewal Commission has been negotiating this matter in closed session, and so I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but the staff have been directed to negotiate with the code developers in good faith. Their proposals to the commission have had several iterations. The latest one we got this week, and we are looking at that. We'll be bringing it back to the entire Urban Renewal Commission in executive session probably within the next 3 or 4 weeks, and we will be able to tell the commission then what the latest developments are, and it'll be up to the Urban Renewal Commission to make a decision about whether or not that proposal is something they want to do. But that is not a decision that they've made yet. So my recommendation would be that as long as we're out there negotiating with people in good faith, if we publish a budget that doesn't show any expenditure, I don't know what kind of good faith that says to the developer, but it wouldn't indicate to me that we were serious about the project. The project may well not ultimately return enough on the investment for the commission to be comfortable, but I can tell you it has been moving in the right direction. I don't know if it's fine, that's not my decision to make.
Well, that's what I thought, that negotiations were still happening. So it can be
Yes.
You can't negotiate something if you don't have the ability to actually follow through with whatever contractual agreement you create. So I was just curious where that was. As long as contract negotiations are still in place, we have to have a placeholder or nothing.
There's no downside to budgeting this, because if the deal doesn't happen, then you don't make the expenditure and you save money at the end of the year. But if you don't budget for it, it seems to me it's going to be a lot harder to go back, because I think that financial institutions will not look favorably on that as a commitment if we make those changes here.
Continue.
Okay, so now we're at the expenditures, which match the revenues, so a little over $1 million. So we're balanced. What did I say? $1 million? That's a little over $1 million. I'm still right. A little over $11 million, and this is the whole project. So the sources of the expenditures are primarily the capital outlay, which is the total salary, and then the bottom line is the contingency and the debt service. Credit. And so I just wanted to do this a little bit for fun, just to show the increment trends over the past few years. And so these are done in percentages, so it kind of fluctuates a little bit. So we're down a little bit with this year at 4.8%.
Here's not over.
We got like 2 months.
So I think this slide probably is the one that bothers me the most. Typically with tax increment financing, we would certainly like to see those increasing values, the assessed value increases, and we can get the return on the investment. So that's a 5% loss right there that we hope to recover in the next couple of years.
The assessor made a $7.2 million sort of boo-boo on us in 2010-11 and called all the coal property taxable. So that's why that 10%, it was really 10-11 was really about a 3 or 4% increase. But the tax machine is so big, and once we brought it to their attention, and it was like probably 3 or 4 months after all the tax so it's sort of like, I know you guys heard about when they're building dams and somebody falls into the concrete, they don't stop pouring cement. That's sort of so like this, if they make a mistake, I mean, they can't stop the process because every municipality is affected by that. Every tax statement is affected by that. So they just took it out. That's why we're showing that there's such a decrease.
But as we do with capital improvements and those assessed values,
Right. Over the 2 years, it's that. It should have been not as much out. So actually, yeah. It's a good question.
Observations are good too.
Moving on. Summary, just a quick summary of the budget changes for 12-13. Rental income, or the base hit, is expected to be down by 22%. Interest income is up by 200%.
That's only $5,000.
Sounds more impressive to say 200%. Total revenue increased by 5.2%, as well as expenditures increased by 5.2%. No new programs are being introduced, and some funds have been reallocated to less popular and more popular programs. And with that, entertain any questions. Any questions?
Properties, so there's properties, considered in the infill, is there, what's the property?
There's one on 10th and Main Street on the corner across from Dutch Brothers, beside the Hops building, and then there's the other one close to KFC's, 12th and Main.
Which is those two right now?
Right now, it's the ones we're targeting.
Is that a staging area for the bridge, or what are they doing on that?
That's a staging area from above.
Oh, from the house, okay.
Yeah.
Do you think with completion of the roadway project that interest in the storefront properties will increase? Is that what we're planning on? Do you have any insight on what will happen to the demand?
Well, we're hoping so. Of course, with the improvements, it's going to show that we're investing in our community. It can show the private world that it's worth investing in, and they might be enticed to invest also. So, with all the improvements, the sidewalk, the bridge, and everything that's going on, I would imagine there would be an upswing in
Our properties on Second and Tumwater that I previously reported were in the name of the city titles, even though paid for by Urban Renewal. Both Brian Shaw and myself had suggested maybe that because they were originally envisioned as something that the city would want, that we should just title them back, keep the title the way it is, and just reduce our debt that we still show owed of 1.934 million by the amount of those two properties that was paid for with urban renewal money. And as a logical way, one, to get the kind of like an albatross, where we've had reported drug activities and police activities in those properties, and to say, hey, we don't need them, either they're disposed of, or we give them back to the city where they're already in the city's name. And if we do that, then I'd love to see us reduce this 1.934 million by the amount of money that the Urban Renewal Commission put into those properties as a just and simple way to correct this problem of they're not in our name anyway.
I don't think that's the case. I thought the houses down there are urban renewal name, are they?
I would have to check on that.
I pulled the title search on them, and they're not in our name. They're in the city's name, and I gave the documents to the city manager.
The revenues are going into the urban renewal budget from the properties.
I think thing, Aaron, is that it removed the urban renewal, the liability of the property too. So, I mean, the city's ultimately responsible, but it just makes it clean for urban renewal. Anything happens down there will relieve urban renewal of any liability. So I think it's be cleaner if just put the city period got us out.
It would also prevent something in the future like we just went through on 1743 Washington. That kind of conclusion.
The GROCO site was a case where we thought it was in our name, but it was in the city's name. And in this case, people thought these two properties on 2nd and Tumwater were in the urban renewal name, but they're in the city's name. And so it's kind of just the opposite, but in this case, we have problems with them, and it's opportunistic for us, as long as they're in the city's name, just to let them stay in the city's name, and for us to separate the Urban Renewal Commission from any potential liability.
As a different topic, on the storefront grant program, you mentioned that there's one letter you received recently and potentially one more coming in very shortly. What's the expected time frame for those being approved? Is that regular interval or not?
Yeah, they're wanting to get them in within the next month or so.
So they would be signed off and
It will take about 30 days to rest them.
But I would hope that some of you people would realize that we do have a liability there, and this is a kind of a reasonable thing, just to keep the Urban Renewal Commission out of an area that it's much like the properties that the Stinson property, which were converted to a wetlands for the jug handle project. They are no longer then really redevelopable property. We shouldn't be in a wetland maintenance mode. This is more of a public works type of thing, or parks. And so that logic of saying, why should we swap it for something that's got redevelopment purposes? And we don't have a good track record of creating economic activity and jobs. And let's start trying to work on things that are not just maintenance or holding on to something, but something that actually creates economic activity.
Is this budget conversation, or should this go before the Urban Renewal Commission?
it does affect this, but it should be Urban Renewal Commission discussion.
But the Urban Renewal District could make those suggestions, right?
I don't think this body here can make the decision
Right.
to change the title or whatever. And I think that's the point that's being made. You don't have the authority to do that.
That's true.
We do have the authority to move it like that.
I don't know where to move it.
It reduces the debt.
We can't move it to the staff.
I don't think you can budget your way out of liability. I think that's a bigger discussion.
Right.
And I think that's one that probably
was there something,
Yeah, please.
William? Was there another question? Okay, please.
So maybe for some of the folks that haven't been involved with this commission on a monthly basis, but the adaptive reuse rehab building grant, Eric, maybe a little explanation of that. Is that interior, exterior,
Yes.
what do you think of that?
So the adaptive reuse grant is focused on interior rehabilitation of buildings within the urban renewal district, targeting a mixed-use component. Mixed use being maybe a combination of office, retail, possibly residential. It is focused on creating additional value in the downtown area. And it's a maximum grant of $150,000 for one grant. It's a one-to-one match, so if we're awarded $150,000, we have to match that annually. We base approval on certain criteria. And I can't recite it verbatim off the top of my head, but it is on our website if you want to take a look at the criteria the form is. We are hoping that any grant is applied for buildings downtown that they consider the historic value of the interior of the building, that they have development experience, the applicant has development experience, and they get points if they, bonus points if they include a residential component, if they put in no match to the grant, if they go above and beyond, those sort of things. So we haven't had an application yet, but there's certainly a buzz out there about this program. I think people have been waiting for this for some time, and I know there are a couple of property owners that are designing their project right now, and they're planning to submit applications.
One other thing is that as a result of doing a detailed review of the budget and our sources of revenue, one of the things that I came out, which was kind of a surprise to me, was how the money comes in from the assessor's office to the city and how it's allocated based upon, in a sense, receivables. And I got a document from the assessor's office that I used to help build this spreadsheet, which shows that we may be in TIF, or in the division of taxes, we have one number, we budgeted a number. So as an example, like in 2011-12, we budgeted 1.879 million, but we budgeted the division of taxes showed that we were going to get 8.79 million, but we budgeted 17.8 million. 80. But what it showed, I was trying to understand how do we have this difference, and where does the money come back into the system after when we start collecting it. And it literally is very interesting to see that we really don't have the money given to us up front, and it kind of trickles in, and it trickles in with interest and over a lot of years. So one of the documents that I got from the assessor's office with a lot of numbers even showed interest and shows a lot of years going out. So that what we see is that we're getting historically on an annualized basis significantly more money than we're budgeting. And so what that means is that this money comes back in to the city, and I was trying to find out where does it come back in a double entry accounting system, so as that we have control of that revenue, because it just can't go into a slush fund. And this becomes very important in how we do it, and a lot of people have not really seen or fully appreciate how this money comes back into the city and what the differences are. So as an example, this year, in 2012-13, if we were to take and add 3% to what we did last year, and I have a budget document from the county that said that we should be calculating between 2.75 and 3.25, so I took 3% annual increase to calculate what our possible new revenue would be from division of taxes. And it came out to 1.935 million, and yet we're going into this budget cycle at 1.83. So that's $105 million in difference, or $105,000 in difference between what this division of taxes number could be based upon the county's estimates as to what is reasonable. And so I took their suggestion of what is reasonable and said, and multiplied it by 3%, and assuming that we have places like the Abernathy Center or the chapel and things like that in our Cove area that, or in our downtown urban renewal area that are receiving improvements. But what's important is how do we account for these monies and budget for these monies? And I got into the budget document and I didn't find a place where it just was reflected. And that concerned me because as somebody that has sold accounting systems for a lot of my life, these become open ends that are not, that don't have a logical close on them. And I talked a little bit with David just briefly before the meeting. Obviously, David agrees with what he's done, and I give him credit for everything that he's done for all of the 19 years. But I would turn around and say that most people don't understand what's happening, and I would love to circulate this spreadsheet, which pretty much explains how this revenue picture really is, if somebody cares to see it.
Okay. David, could you respond to that?
Sure, I talked with Paul quite a bit about that. We use different assumptions. I use the assumption that the assessed value was going to go up 2.5%. That's the best estimates I had when we did this. And I estimated a collection of 95%. And Paul is using a 3% number with a 97% collection rate. It all comes in as either, we have so much receivable at the beginning of the year, we have so much cash. So when we get more cash in, we spend it out. If we get more cash in, we'll have more at the other end to show it. It all shows up here in the revenue line. And
But if you get additional revenues, you can go right into the actual.
right, you'll have more to spend last year, next year.
For it and a control number for it. And so this should be, how do you put what they know, and at the end of every year, or at the starting of any period, they send out that they get this document that lists off what the receivables are for each accounting period. So once I take those receivable numbers at the beginning of an accounting period, I at least have a control figure which I can audit back to, and we don't have that. And it's establishing those.
As I told you, that the numbers you're looking at are sort of a cash basis. July through June, we have at the end of each year, we have accruals for the 2 months on either end of the year, which we drop off or bring back. And every cent, I reconcile this thing with the assessor every year to the penny, and they're audited. We're never a penny off on our thing. This could end. Making some assumptions, and you're missing some pieces too with the receivables. There's about 15 years of receivables that are not there. You're using assumptions. We can all sit there and make assumptions. Somebody can do 3.5%, somebody can use 2.25%, a different collection rate, and come up with a different number. I've always been conservative. I've stuck with this system. It's usually when we get the assessor, we take an average of what they say. Of course, urban renewal is a little bit different too, because it does not follow the same pattern. Because when the county puts out their estimates, it's based on citywide. Sometimes urban renewal district is greater than what they say. Sometimes it will be less. And we're also heading towards compression, so to just go out and say we're going to get 3% all the time is a little bit risky. So
So David, what you're saying is you're being a little more conservative.
Exactly.
And also, all the revenues indeed come into the urban renewal accounts, and it just shows up as a larger end balance or bigger beginning balance in next year's budget.
Right.
Is that right?
Exactly.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm more comfortable with my finance director being conservative on the
Yes.
revenue side. So I would rather err on the side of underestimating those revenues than the other side.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Mayor, was there something you wanted?
No, it was just said.
Okay, close that. Any other questions for Aaron?
Would it make sense to show the difference between that conservative value and the actual in its own line item?
But you don't know what the actual is going to be until the end of next year.
Right, but it would come in the next year, it would show the next year, so we could actually see that figure,
I think it's in the ending balance where it shows up.
but not as a separate item, because that's a carryover.
So you're
That
looking
shows
to
up more.
see last year's budget compared to last year's actual, or historical wages, what we actually budgeted, and we actually can see those two items.
Right.
But that will show next
Process
year.
for financial audit.
Right.
That's what it shows, those differences. The budget, the formats for the budget, they don't blend.
Right.
And we can make some special schedules. And we,
It would show up in next year's budget, just like 10, 11 shows up in this year's budget?
yeah, but it doesn't show what we budgeted.
Right.
You'd have to look at the financials to see that.
You'd have to go back to last year's budget and compare it to this year's, the actual, for the years gone by. But I see what you're asking for now.
We get an audit, financial audit each year, and those numbers show up very specific.
Is that a question?
Mr. Chair, where are we?
Thank you. That's what we were just
We're
looking
on
for.
item 6.
Okay, is that open questions for?
Yeah, we're dealing specifically with this issue here.
Specifically with,
So are we on 8?
No, we're not. We're going to be transitioning to 7.
Okay.
And David, are you fine with 7? Okay. Is there anything more?
These, I think, are...
Yeah, 6 and 7 have been voted.
That's compression.
Yeah.
Any adjustments?
Okay, you had a question?
I did, if we're at that point, then I just got a couple of questions. First of all, I apologize to Mr. Fraser and Mr. Wimmer because I never asked specific line item question, right? But I'm going to, I just have to. First of all, you referenced the Amtrak station, and I know we've been talking about that for at least probably longer. I know it's not a lot of money that we're looking at, but give me some ideas about what is it we're going to spend that money on? What are we hoping to gain? Is that advertising for a tenant or what actually is that? Is it $30,000?
Right, 30,000 this year, it's 35 this year, and then 30 next year. We already spent some of the 35. So we're about 27 and some change left over this year. That would be for design services. Once we figure out how to use that, so we go and solicit design services from architects to see how that would be renovated. There needs to be some tenant improvements to that building inside the shop. There's no way it's going to be marketed the way it is now. It can't be used.
And I thought I heard you say something about getting a vendor in there that would generate revenue or something like that, right? So what are you thinking along those lines, or what are we thinking along?
If I could just finish that last thought. The first part would be design services, and the bulk of it would be the actual construction of the tenant improvements. And so once you get through all of that, I mean, that's pretty conservative for those two actions that we're putting right there. And I'm sorry, I missed it.
No, I'm just wondering what the end use of what we're looking at to get a tenant in there who's going to generate revenue and improve the value of that area, of that north end. I don't know. Are you talking a restaurant? Are you talking a bike rental shop?
That's the exercise we're going through now with the commission. And so that's why we're trying to identify a use, proper use for that site. And so that's the exercise with the commission.
I don't think you have those money too, but how many square feet is that?
It's only about it's almost 2,000 square feet. So it can be done. I've gotten some preliminary estimates from design services from some local architects, and I think there's a way it can be done.
Does it have to stay next to the rail line, or can they?
They just move it.
Oh, dear God. No. What's the way to rest?
The commissioners actually can go on a tour of that facility. And of course, anyone who wants to go, we're going to take them down and show them the site, and so that they can get better handle on it. And we're going to try to, within the budgeted amounts we have, see what we can do to market.
So,
Oh, go ahead. There's a queue apparently. Without a line item question, I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about budgeted versus actual expenditures, because I'm looking at our capital outlays and it looks like we're barely moving the needle on doing what we had planned last year, and we're budgeting approximately the same amount, excluding the code. So what are we doing to actually move these projects forward and spend those money to get the improvements in there? I mean, I'm looking at the rehab program. We had 150, went to zero. We spent zero. Storefront, we had 140, it's 10,000. McLaughlin, over $1 million. We spent 20,000. So what are we doing to push those projects forward so we actually will start rolling some of those plans?
For the rehab program, it was adopted last budget cycle, but there was never any criteria developed. So it couldn't be implemented. It couldn't have applicants. That was one of the first things that I did come in, and we got that approved. And so now it's active. It's active as of 6 weeks, maybe, almost maybe 2 months. So that's why that number hasn't been moved, because nobody was able to apply. The storefront grant, there was kind of a stall there, and I think a lot of that was due to the fact that Diamonds in the Rough, the state grant came through, and some folks were waiting for that because that was going to augment the grant that we had. And so that came late, and that finished out around March. And so the folks that were hoping to get that money, I think there were 5 that applied, only 1 was approved. But we have some others who either had told about the storefront grant or were aware of all the intricacies of the grant and how to apply and so forth. So that's kind of been my mission over the past 5 months or so, is to educate folks in our district about these grants. And so we generated some interest in that. And like I said earlier, we do have a letter of intent. We've got another one coming. And then there's some additional interest in the folks we're going to apply for the fiscal years in. As for the McLaughlin Boulevard project,
Do you want me to cover that one?
yeah, I think we will.
So for McLaughlin Boulevard, the design was programmed to start in 2011-12, and the entire amount for design and construction that is being budgeted, it covers the construction as well. And the reason why we did that is we're receiving, I think, $3.4 million from Metro for the project, and we felt that it was important to set that money aside because we were committing to our local share for that. And now we're slowly getting into some design work, and then construction will be in 2012-13. So it's mostly representing the commitment of those dollars as the local match as we move through the actual programming, the financial programming with Metro.
I have a question. Did anybody want to talk about that issue right there? Because I was going to go back to the train depot, so. Any other thoughts?
On the Metro enhanced grant or the Metro for McLaughlin, we identified a couple areas of significant concern. One was a roundabout down below McDonald's on, what's the street? Dunes Drive, as being detrimental to our commitment to the mortgage area, because you can't get around it. It's difficult. We were, as an example, hoping to see that go away.
That was just the original concept.
Yeah, it's just so there were many of us that voiced a desire to see that some pragmatic thinking that would go into this. And then another thing was just to make sure that any improvements along the Oregon City Shopping Center were not detrimental to business and the creation of businesses and improving our economy. And some of the proposals along that line might close down a lot of the access in that area and therefore have a depressing impact upon the Oregon City Shopping Center and economic development. So there is a strong desire on the part of the Urban Renewal Commission to ensure that nothing is done that has adverse effects on economic development and job creation.
Okay, Eric, on the train depot, I think the first, you're talking tenant improvements, but I think we're talking about gutting out that building first, and then as soon as we get a tenant, we can do tenant improvements, because we really don't know what the tenant's going to be. So is that what you're
Well, that's kind of the exercise that I'd like to have with the commission, is to decide what product they want out of this deal. Whether they want it to be sort of flex space or office space, or chop it up or open it up, whatever. So that I don't know yet, but that's something that the commission can decide.
On the Amtrak, to follow up with that, I know it's the commission's responsibility to figure out what product they want to market, attract whatever tenant, but I believe it is directly our responsibility as the budget committee to make sure that there's adequate protection for urban renewal. When we spend this money to attract and help a tenant move in, are there any protections as far as checking creditworthiness, checking, locking in long-term lease, other things like that, so that we don't have a tenant move in, we spend money, 6 months later, they wanted to open up an organic brewery and they've never brewed beer before and they go under, we have another Black Point in. Do we have protections this time around so we don't look foolish to the taxpayer?
That's a very good question. Any tenant that wants to come in and lease urban renewal property would definitely look at their financials and their business plan, their experience in doing business and so forth, seeing how solid they are. As far as set criteria, I haven't seen any of those yet. But it only makes sense to clearly look at a proposal that comes in.
I'd like to add to that because the people that came in and did Black Point had substantial business expertise. It was a big group. And so I would like to see that criteria developed and come to the commission.
Okay. It comes down to how you work the deal. I mean, it could be just a straight lease. You could try to incentivize them to come in. I think Black Point Inn situation, if I'm not mistaken, some money was given to them as an incentive to start a business. That's not something that Urban Renewal Commission has to do. I mean, we can
Or will do.
Or will do.
But we don't want to remodel to their specification with our money.
Right. And so that, again, that's one of the things that we need to talk about, because there is the option of creating a flex space, something that would work for a certain market, or like if you're looking at startup, you don't need a lot for that. You don't need a lot of office. It just depends on what kind of use they're wanting to come up with there. And so if we decide on a use, then we can go after those companies or businesses that want that type of use. Does that make sense? The energy efficient.
Yep.
In adequate vetting of the space, there's over 5,000 square feet underneath the concrete platform. So I went to the DEQ to find out if we could develop that space under the platform, and found beyond a question of a doubt that we can't. DEQ said that all we had to do was bring a plan to them, and that was properly vetted, properly gone through, but there was no DEQ problems associated because it had the appropriate business spec. So I just wanted to find out to make sure that we didn't lose the potential of a great deal of space under that. As a person, a landlord who rents space, I know the value of that type of square footage, and it carries a significant value. So I got vocal communiques from DEQ saying that it was possible.
Right, thank you. There.
I'm so thankful. If the Urban Renewal Commission wishes our staff to pursue something in terms of asking whether, in fact, the understandings we have with DEQ in terms of the problems of using that space should go forward, it's the staff that should be going to talk to DEQ.
Yeah.
We reckon. And I think it's inappropriate for us as individuals to determine whether something is acceptable to DEQ or not. That's not our job. We surely can, as a commission, or a renewal commission, directly to staff to explore these things. But I think any commissioner that takes it on themselves to actually take on the staff responsibilities is irresponsible.
I didn't think it that way. I felt that it was misrepresented, and I wanted to clarify whether or not the misrepresentation...
Who misrepresented?
Nancy Kershaw.
Would you want to respond to that, Ms. Grasher?
Well, I am planning to present a comprehensive response to that at our next urban renewal meeting where Eric is going to be discussing Amtrak. But we have an existing agreement with DEQ that has very clearly described commitments of the city or the Urban Renewal Commission. And it is a legal document that's recorded. It was part of receiving no further action for the site, which is a very important declaration, so that we can quit monitoring the groundwater and soil conditions at the site, which costs a lot of money. And the agreement we have with them right now is that there will be no exposure pathways from the contaminants that are underneath the slab underneath the building to the public. And what was established at this point was protection against those exposure pathways would consist of fencing off underneath the building. Right now there's actually a concrete slab that covers up the soil area that was most highly contaminated with pentachlorophenol. And then we are, based on our existing agreement, is to be fenced off and the gate is to be locked. So that way there's no potential for the typical exposure pathways. So if the commission at some point in the future wanted to go and pursue a different agreement with DEQ, that's certainly a possibility. But at this point, the agreement we have, which is based on about 10 years of environmental cleanup at that site, is what I just said.
The key issue was if we could get a $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000 improvement in our rent potential, getting a greater return on investment. Due diligence said to me, the city has got zero return. Now is the time to see if we could get something. So I did. This was just pure feasibility analysis. I asked for the information from Nancy, the contact information, and it was given to me so I could go through and reread everything. I did every document, and I went through the channels to make sure that I was doing that.
She's the channel.
And so I went directly to her and got the information.
And I pursued it with DEQ.
All I did was call and try to find out if there was a return on investment.
This is not a budget.
This is not a budget thing.
This is not a budget discussion. I don't know why we're wasting 15 minutes even talking about it.
I don't know.
Just let me reiterate here, these are questions that
About
are
the budget?
directed for Harry.
That question had nothing to do with the budget.
Mr. Chairman.
But
Well, I think we want to be careful. I know it's hard not to have mission creep at one of these, so I think in good faith everyone's trying to focus on that. The real question before the budget committee is, does the committee want to approve an expenditure for a priority that the Urban Renewal Commission has set, which is for the staff to go out and develop a plan after we take them on a tour of the depot? That's really the only question I think we're trying to deal with. Do you want to budget money for the Urban Renewal Commission to have an opportunity to do something with the depot this year?
Right.
That's really what's in front of you.
And I think that we do, and as I said, I think if you're short, I think you should have 40 to 45 in that category. Truly, if you're going to do any planning work, any type of work to make it look presentable, and then TIs on top of that, you can always get, and I think, if you would personally sign a guarantee with leases to do their business and their individual basis co-lessees. That way they're on them personally to help avoid some issues in the past. You can also amortize your TI expenses for these things to try to recoup some of those costs. I know you know that. So there's ways to do that. But I think that's a little short category. We have to do the work making it work presentable for people to walk in. So probably today, people get paid. And maybe it's something that after the commissioners go take a look and see what's there and decide.
Are you proposing an adjustment? Like a motion?
Well, I haven't seen the facts, so I don't know what's there. So depending how severe the condition is.
Yeah, what I'm synthesizing here and listening is there's a process. And it's essential that we follow the process. And, you know, I can appreciate people taking ownership and being concerned and asking what are relevant questions. All these are relevant questions. But, you know, trying to stay on task here and to stay within the scope of what's on the agenda here, I have to listen to the staff and listen to the commissioners as well.
Mr. Chairman, it sounds like, though, what's being proposed is, and I don't know, well, we just don't know, but I think Commissioner Russell is pretty astute in assuming that we can easily use more money for that project. I mean, I think that's true, and I was just talking to Mr. Wimmer, and if you want to, proposing a budget adjustment of $25,000 more for that project, I think we can probably make that work in the budget.
At this point, I don't know if you need that much, but I guess what I'll make a motion recommending that we increase the Amtrak station from 30 to 45,000.
From 30 to 40.
30 to 45.
Yeah.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. We can make that work.
Okay, discussion?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
When was the tour?
It's going to be on May 2nd
May 2nd?
at
May
the
2nd.
regular Renewal Commission meeting.
What time is that?
We're doing 5 o'clock.
Can you bring our truck?
It's not that bad, is it?
Oh, okay, just
When you-
point of order here, please. We have a motion, we have a second, we're in discussion, please.
So when you send out to the commission, the Urban Renewal Commission about the tour, can you send it to all of the
Yes, I will do that.
members here so that everybody knows?
Recorded accurately.
Call the question.
Well, he's saying he's got a discussion on, he said,
Please.
With respect to the city manager, a minute ago, you told this body that it was really our job to say yes or no to the Urban Renewal Commission, that they should go forward or not, but not really get into details. And now you proposed, almost proposed a motion, but proposed an idea that we should add to the budget. So which is it? Is it we should just say yes or no? Or we should, if it's something that you want, we should
That's a great question. I'm really glad you asked it, and I can't wait to answer it for you. What I proposed was a solution for the commission to look at this project and get back focused on what was before us tonight, which is not to design tenant improvements or create a self-guided tour for ourselves on a site we haven't been to yet. So I think I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, but what I really meant to say was we need to focus on what's the question, which is do you want to budget something for this project? And what I've just proposed here was try to encapsulate what Commissioner Russo was doing, which I believe was to propose a budget adjustment, which is entirely within the province of the Commission. But
So where we're at, folks, is we've had a motion, it's been seconded, we're in discussion. Is there any other areas that we need to address for discussion? Please. No questions, okay. Let's call the question on the motion, and if we could take a vote.
Betty Mum. Aye. Chris Story.
Aye.
William Gifford.
Aye.
Sean Batchelor.
Aye.
Paul Edgar.
Aye.
Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Kathy Rock.
Aye.
Chris Geiger.
Aye.
Doug Neely.
Aye.
Casey Flesh.
Aye.
Autumn Rudisil. Carol Pauley.
Aye.
Graham Peterson.
Aye.
Brian Shaw.
Aye.
Aaron Olson.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, very good. The motion passes. Okay, I think it's safe to say we are definitely on number 8 here.
Yeah.
We have transitioned. We have recalculated. Since we are still on discussion and consideration of any adjustments, we still have time.
Chair,
Please.
would this be a good time to take a break since the next set is usually fairly lively?
You know,
Or at least last year.
You're doing great. I would say let's take a break. Let's take 10 minutes for 5 minutes. We are back in our meeting for the Urban Renewal Budget Committee meeting, and we are on agenda items 8 for discussion and consideration of any adjustments. Are there any other questions for discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
I'd like to move that the Urban Renewal Budget Committee approve fiscal year 2012-2013 Urban Renewal budget of $11,094,650 and establish that the maximum amount of tax from the division of taxes shall be levied.
Second.
All right, we have a second on that. Discussion. Call the question on the motion. Ready for a vote?
Betty Mum.
Aye.
Chris Story.
Aye.
William Gifford.
Aye.
Sean Datchler.
Aye.
Paul Edgar.
Aye.
Rocky Smith.
What are we voting on now? Oh, well, geez. Okay, aye. I have another meeting. I just have to start.
Kathy Roth.
Aye.
Chris Geiger.
Aye.
Doug Neely. Casey Flesh.
Aye.
Autumn Rudisill. Carol Pauley. Graham Peterson.
Aye.
Brian Shaw.
Aye.
Aaron Olson.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right. We are now on item number 10, which is adjournment. I want to thank all of you for your participation and spirit of cooperation in making this an effective and productive meeting. Since there is no other further business, the meeting is adjourned.
Good job.